sound design and sound engineering in general, EQ, or an equalizer, is one of the most valuable tools that you have at your disposal. There's so much that you can do with EQ, and when it comes to sound mixing and sound mastering, a lot of that actually happens with EQ. So in this video, we're going to talk about what EQ is and then show you a few different practical effects that you can create with EQ in your edits. So an EQ, or an equalizer, is basically a tool that lets you adjust different frequencies on the range of frequencies in your audio. If you've ever had a car that had the knobs on it, or digital display that allows you to change the bass, mid, and treble frequencies, that's an EQ. So when you turn the bass knob, only the bass frequencies turn up. When you turn the mid knob, the mid frequencies turn up. When you turn the treble knob, the high frequencies turn up. So an EQ allows you to choose which frequencies you want to adjust and turn them up or down depending on what you want. So this is what an EQ looks like. Now I've got this EQ effect placed on the music on this video so I can give you a good example of how this works. But basically this is an EQ that has 5 bands. Each band is controlling a specific frequency and allows me to adjust the level of that frequency. So for example, down here on the low end, we've got band number 1, which I can increase and decrease. I can also change the frequency of it. So let's say I wanted to increase the volume of the track around the 90 hertz range. That would be right about here. And I can increase it or I can decrease it. I can do the same thing with all of these. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I've got my low band and my high band. So the low is just going to control all of the low. And the high is just going to control all of the high. So as I play through this music, I'll kind of show you what is going on. So as the music's playing, you can see the frequencies that are involved in this music. You'll notice that there's more low frequencies in the music than there are high right now. If we had more cymbals or hi-hat or drums, you would see a lot more high frequencies. But because this is piano and low strings, you've got a lot of low frequencies. Now, as I take one of these frequencies and I start moving it around, you'll be able to hear that specific frequency. So I'm going to take number 3 here and I'm just going to increase it. And then I'm going to hit play and I'm going to move that back and forth so you can hear how it's affecting the different frequency levels. Okay, so see how I can adjust kind of the volume levels of different frequencies using the EQ. That's basically how an EQ works. So now I want to show you 3 different practical effects that you can get with EQ that you will find yourself using all the time in your edits and your sound design. So the first one here is a clip that we worked on earlier where we've got our guy kind of walking outside in the city, and we added some footstep sound effects to him while he's walking. Now, the problem with this, in fact, let me just play it here so you can hear what's going on again for refresh. Okay, so it's really hard to hear those footsteps, and the reason is because we had to turn them really far down. So you notice that we had them down at about 10 dB here. Let's see, yeah, around 10 dB. Let's put them back to 0 and just listen to those footsteps by themselves. Okay, so the reason that we had to turn them down is because this recording that we got from a library is actually, it sounds like somebody walking with boots on a wood floor. So you can hear kind of the thump, the low frequency thump of the wood floor, and then also kind of the high frequency of his pants and maybe some keys jingling in there and the tap of the shoe on the wood floor. Okay, so it's got kind of this whole tonal range. Well, our talent here in the video, he's wearing tennis shoes and he's walking on concrete. Now, concrete doesn't have that same thump because it's not hollow, right? It's very solid. And because it's made of stone, you end up getting a very high frequency, just kind of brushing sound or like tapping sound of him walking on it. So what we're going to do with this clip is we're going to use what's called a high pass filter. A high pass filter is an effect with EQ that only allows the high frequencies to come through and makes the low frequencies really quiet. So what that's going to do is it's going to pull out the thump of the wood floor and leave the high frequencies of the step, which will make it sound a lot more natural in this location. That way we don't have to turn it down so far that you can't hear it. We can leave it plenty loud because it'll sound better with what we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and add this parametric equalizer effect right here. In your editing software, there will be a similar effect. It'll say something about equalizer or EQ that allow you to do the exact same things. And if I click edit on it, it brings up this equalizer that we were looking at just a little bit ago. So what I want to do is on this clip, rather than turn the whole thing down, I just want to take out the low frequencies. So I can grab this low node right here and just start pulling it down like this. That's going to pull out all of these low frequencies and make them quiet and only allow the high frequencies to pass through, which is why it's called a high pass filter. So let's see what that sounds like. Okay, and we might go a little bit further. Okay, it's starting to get pretty quiet because we're pulling out a lot of those frequencies. And I might take our high point here and increase it as well. So because it's starting to get so quiet, we want to really boost the level of those high frequencies. Okay, and that might be a little bit too much. Let's kind of pull it back here a little bit. Maybe even a little bit more. On top of that, I might also want to just increase our mids a little bit right here. Just about like that. Okay, so it doesn't sound super natural right now, but if we kind of put this into the mix, I think it's going to work a lot better than kind of the thump of the wood that we had before. So let's unsolo that and listen to the whole thing and see how it sounds. Okay, so that's a lot more passable as somebody walking on gravel or on a concrete on a parking garage like this. Now, it's still too loud, of course, so we'll bring the volume down. Try that. And maybe even a little bit quieter. Honestly, we might have it just a little bit too much here. I want to just kind of dial back the effect a little bit. Maybe you have it too quiet. Okay, that's more like it. Now, I'm listening on computer speakers. I don't have headphones on or reference monitors or anything, so it might not be perfect, but that's kind of the idea that we're going for. So that's how you would use a high-pass filter. Now, on this next example, we're going to do the opposite of that, and we're going to do what's called a low-pass filter. And so a low-pass filter, as you've probably already guessed, is where you allow the low frequencies to come through and not the high frequencies. The best way to explain this is if you've ever been driving and you had somebody pull up next to you at a stoplight or something and they were blasting music in their car and you can hear the bass thumping and playing really loud, but the high frequencies you can't hear as well. Well, that's kind of like what a low pass filter sounds like. So what happens is when the music in the car tries to get out of the car and the upholstery in the car and the way the car is built is really good at trapping high frequencies. Okay, because high frequencies are really easy to trap. They're not as strong, if you will. Whereas bass frequencies are really difficult to trap, and so they'll pass through pretty much anything. Which is why when the car is closed and there's music playing on the inside of the car, on the outside of the car you can only hear the bass frequencies and not the high frequencies. And so this actually becomes a really useful effect that you can use in your videos, and here's an example of one way that you can use this. So in this clip we've got, this is from the iPhone video that I showed earlier. We've got the subway coming by inside the subway station, and we go from, I'll play this in a second, but we've got a shot of the subway going by where the camera is outside the subway, where it's really loud and flying by, and then we cut to a shot of inside the subway as it's going. Now, here's how it sounds right now without doing anything. Okay, doesn't sound bad, but what we want to do is add this low pass filter effect because naturally when the camera comes inside the train car, you wouldn't be able to hear the outside sound as well. The bass frequencies would be coming through into the car, but not as much the high frequencies. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the point where we cut the camera from outside to inside the train car, and I'm just going to put a cut right there, and then select this second half of the clip, and that's where we're going to add our parametric equalizer effect. Okay, so I'm going to add the effect on there. Go ahead and hit edit, and then we're going to do a nice low pass filter effect. So I'm going to take this high end and I'm just going to drag it down like this. So only the low frequencies are coming through. So let's see how that sounds. And that might do it just like that. So let's go ahead and listen to that again. Okay, so see how you hear how it kind of feels like we transported inside the subway train, because now you can hear only the low frequencies. Now it's kind of an abrupt transition, so then what I would do on something like this is just come in here and add a little really short cross dissolve like that, just a little fade so that it isn't so abrupt. Let's hear how that sounds. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, yeah, that might be a little bit too much, but that's the idea. So just to further the effect, just to make it really clear, I'm going to go a little bit further on it, and then this is the final sound. So that is a low pass filter. Now the third effect that I'm going to show you here is kind of a combination of a low pass filter and a high pass filter, which gives you what we call a radio effect. So on this clip right here, I've got this video that I shot of a boxer, and I wanted to, for the edit here, I wanted to create sort of a radio sound effect. So I've got this sound. In fact, I'm going to turn this off for now. I've got this sound of a couple of commentators commentating while he's boxing. So it sounds like this.
Beautiful straight right hand, right on the face, critically important. Can he do it for 12 rounds?
Okay, so that's kind of the voiceover that we're using in this clip. I want to make it sound like it's coming out of a radio. Now, the reason this is a combination of a high pass and a low pass is because we're going to bring down both the highs and the lows and only allow the mids to shine through. The reason this sounds like a radio is because if you think about like an old cheap radio, it's not like a high-end speaker. It doesn't have a good bass response or a good high-end response. It really is just, you know, it's just kind of those mid-tones coming through. And so when you combine those two, you end up with something that sounds like a radio. So if I go back into my equalizer, you can see here that I've selected this frequency right about, let's see, where am I? Right about, 2600 hertz is the frequency that we've selected, and we've basically pulled out everything else so that it's completely silent and only that is playing through. And if I turn that on for both of these clips, this is what that sounds like. Kind of a cool effect, right? So that's the radio effect. So there you go. There's 3 practical effects that you can use with EQ to get different effects in your sound design, your sound edit. Again, EQ is one of the most powerful tools. These are pretty drastic effects that you can create with it, but even with just subtle tweaks to EQ, you can really pull out different frequencies and make things sound the way that you want them to. So definitely spend some time practicing with EQ, try out some of these effects, and be thinking about how you can use them in your edit.